You are no accident. Your birth was no mistake or mishap. Your life is no fluke of nature. Your parents may not have planned you, but God did. God wasn't surprised by your birth, but in fact, he was expecting it. Long before you were conceived by your parents, you were conceived in the mind of God. It is not luck, it is not a coincidence that you are alive and breathing at this moment. The Bible says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are alive and breathing because God wanted you here. That means that God planned every single detail of your body. He chose your race. He chose the color of your skin, your hair, your nose, and your big feet. He even took time to count the hairs on your head. God custom made your body just the way he wanted it. He knew the gifts and talent you would possess and your unique personality. The Bible says that you know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made bit by bit and how I was sculpted from nothing. I want to let you know this morning that God made you for a reason. He decided when you would be born and how long you would live. He planned the days of your life in advance. He chose the exact time that you would be born and the exact time that you would die. The Bible says in Psalms 139, you saw me before I was born and you scheduled every day of my life before I started to breathe. Every day was recorded in your book. God even planned where you live. He said, I'm going to get the glory out of everything in your life. Your race and your language and your nationality was on purpose. The Bible says in Acts that he determined the time set for men and the exact places where they should live. Nothing in your life is guesswork. It's all for a purpose. Isn't it amazing that in spite of the circumstances of your birth or who your parents were, God had a plan when he created you. It didn't matter if your parents was poor and hardworking or if they was rich crackheads. God knew that those two individuals would possess the right genetic makeup to create the unique you he had in mind. They have the DNA that God needed to make you. And while there are illegitimate parents, there is no such thing as illegitimate children. God, y'all done got quiet. While there are illegitimate parents, there's no such thing as illegitimate children. Many children are unplanned by their parents, but they are not unplanned by God. God's purpose was for you to get here and do something special. That's how much you mean to God. The Bible says in Romans 8 that God allows seasons of difficulty to stretch us. But it's hard for us to trust him when our world is going crazy around us. But I suggest to you today that you've got to learn to take your eyes off that circumstance. You've got to learn to take your eyes off that struggle, that hardship, whatever it is. And you've got to look up to Jesus. Tell your neighbor, we've got to look up to Jesus. We've got to focus on Jesus. So no matter how impossible we may see the situation we're in or how hopeless and difficult the days ahead may seem, God sees what we don't see. And he's working the whole thing out, and God is going to bring us through. God sees possibilities in our impossibilities. For with God, nothing will be impossible. God is the God of the impossible. God is saying this morning, young brother, young sister, sister, I want to blow your mind. Look at how God opened up the Red Sea. Look at the furnace that almost killed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Look at how he raised Lazarus and all of the other miracles recorded in the Bible. And if God could do all of this, then I believe that there's nothing too hard for God. Turn to your neighbor and say, there's nothing too hard for God. Come on, tell them there's nothing too hard for God. Power belongs to God. For with God, nothing will be impossible. Let him see you through your struggle. He said in Luke 18 verse 27, what is impossible with men is possible with God. God majors in the impossible. And a whole lot of people are going to miss the plan of God for their life because they listen to people rather than God. If our friends could do it, then there would have been no need for Jesus to go to Calvary. You thought people had the power. You thought that people's opinions were greater than the plans of God. But I've got a word of encouragement for somebody in here this morning. The Bible says in Jeremiah, I know the plans that I have for you, saith the Lord. They're plans of good and not of evil. They're plans to give you hope for your future. People are limited. People will fail you. People will hurt you. People will lie to you. That's why you can't trust them all the time. God is saying you were built for this. God is saying you got everything you need to win. Look at your neighbor and say, you've got everything